And a news alert coming in. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addresses the nation after the ceasefire. In a television address, he said that Israel has achieved a historic victory, and this victory will stand for generations. These are words of the Israeli Prime Minister, who has spoken after the ceasefire announcement. He also said that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. He said, "We have thwarted Iran's nuclear project, and if anyone in Iran tries to rebuild it, we will act with the same determination, with the same intensity to foil any attempt," quote unquote, Netanyahu. He praised the US President Donald Trump. He said that Israel never had a better friend than Trump in the White House. He added that Israel aims to defeat Hamas and bring about the release of all hostages in Gaza, both living and dead. News alert coming in, viewers. That was the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has addressed Israel after the announcement of the ceasefire between Iran and Israel. This was a televised address. Netanyahu said that Israel has achieved a historic victory, and this victory will stand for generations. And he said that Israel has thwarted Iran's nuclear project, and if anyone in Iran tries to rebuild it, Israel will act with the same intensity. All right, let us discuss this further with our guest, who's joining us live on the broadcast here from Montenegro, Edward P. Joseph, who's a lecturer at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies and foreign policy analyst. Edward, always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us. Sir, after all these rounds of talks, 12 days of intense hostilities, now, of course, we've heard what Israel has said, that if Iran tries to rebuild or go back to its nuclear project, they will respond with the same intensity. But Iran, just a few hours ago, there was a statement from Iran which said that Iran is not seeking nuclear weapons, but will assert legitimate rights. Now, if you just look at it from both sides, it isn't really far from where we were initially. Is this spelling a new norm now that Iran continues to enrich, and US or Israel, they continue to use kinetic means to neutralize Iran's strategic sites?
First, very good to be with you and your viewers. And your question gets right to the point, which is that we're in a dramatically different situation from 12 days ago. Let's remember, 12 days ago, the IAEA itself had cited Iran's violation of its commitments to the non-proliferation regime, and it repeated the, quote, serious warnings from IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi about the inability of IAEA inspectors to determine whether Iran had a peaceful nuclear program. So what does that mean? It means the nuclear watchdog was giving its most serious warning yet about the development and the state of the Iranian nuclear program. And now, 12 days later, that program is in shambles. Now, we don't know the exact extent of the damage, but we do know that there was serious damage inflicted on Iran's main nuclear sites, including this key enrichment site, not just at Natanz, but the heavily buried and protected fortified site at Fordo. And in addition to that, Israel conducted repeated strikes on Iran's ballistic missile capability. And it's very important to note here, its capacity, Iran's capacity to build and manufacture centrifuges and ballistic missile parts. So this was all part of a strategic operation by Israel that the United States, of course, provided this coup de grace with this bunker-busting bombs aimed chiefly at, but not only at Fordo. So we're in a dramatically different situation. And the comments that you referred to about Iran actually are positive. These are encouraging. First, because the fact that Iran is claiming that somehow this was a victory and that they're in good position is actually encouraging, because it suggests that the regime has avoided the humiliation that it feels, and therefore there's less of a chance, less, not zero, but less of a chance that Iran would take some additional measures, commit terrorism or other acts that, of course, could restart the conflict. And finally, it also suggests that Iran won't leave the nuclear non-proliferation treaty. And that's very important. There's been a lot of speculation about that. Of course, we don't have a final decision, but I take it that these remarks are encouraging, and they show they really and truly what we have to acknowledge is a highly successful operation by Israel, later joined by the United States. Please.
Edward, as you mentioned, now the exact extent of the damage to Iran's nuclear facilities, that will need to be ascertained to the exact point. But there's definitely been a setback. There's no denying that. IAEA has also confirmed it in a way. But what's to say or what's to confirm that Iran does not go back to its enrichment facilities or its abilities to enrich? But I'll come back to that. Stay with me, Edward. There's more breaking news and news alerts coming in. All right, more developments coming in. Israeli Defense Minister had a telephonic conversation with the US Secretary of Defense. Israel Katz from Israel, in a post on social media, said that he thanked Pete Hegseth for President Donald Trump's bold decision to act against the Iranian nuclear threat. And he said that the defense secretary in the US praised Israel and the IDF for the historic achievements that were made. Now, Katz, however, emphasized that Israel will respect the ceasefire as long as the other side does. And there you have the statement which has come in from Israel. A development which we are just bringing to you at this point. Statement which has come in from the Israeli defense minister saying that they will respect the ceasefire as long as Iran maintains it as well. All right, let me now cut right back to Edward Joseph, who's here with me on the broadcast. Edward, we were discussing the dynamic changes that have taken place in the last 12 days. We are now in a ceasefire that we've seen between Israel and Iran. All sides seem to have acknowledged it, but all three sides are also claiming victory. And the initial hours of any ceasefire are usually the most fragile. In your assessment, sir, do you feel the ceasefire will remain fragile? Will it hold?
Well, you're right to ask the question. Any ceasefire is tenuous. We saw that in the immediate aftermath of President Trump's announcement of a ceasefire, that there was still one more exchange between Iran and Israel. And we saw something else. We saw President Trump come down very sternly against both parties and criticized Israel as well, and demanding that the fighting stop. And we saw in your package, you saw that, where the President Trump stated this is not about regime change. That's very important. That was, again, validating the position of the United States prior to this, that as Vice President Vance had said, the United States is not at war with Iran, but at war with Iran's nuclear weapons program. And so that's, again, encouraging. And then in addition, we have significant political implications here. First, it's encouraging that Iran wants to somehow claim victory. Let it save face. That makes the situation less volatile, less likely to revert back into conflict. Second, for both President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, this is a huge political boost in both cases. President Trump is now en route to the Netherlands for the NATO summit. So he attends this major gathering of the key United States Western allies, and he comes in a very strong, basically victorious position. And that helps him both with respect to Russia and with respect to China, neither of which did anything to help Iran in this crisis. In Iran's worst ever crisis, what did we see? That its friends, it has strategic partnerships with both China and Russia. And what did these strategic partners offer? Moscow and Beijing offered basically nothing. And we know Russia, in particular, is dependent on Iran for drones that it uses to kill civilians, not just military targets, but also civilians in Ukraine. So again, President Trump in a very strong position as he heads to the NATO summit. Prime Minister Netanyahu also in a very strong position, and we have to all hope that that will give him the impetus to finally end the terrible war in Gaza, which has inflicted so much suffering on those civilians in Gaza. Long overdue, and he can basically accept terms that he might not have accepted prior to this very successful operation in Israel. And finally, let me conclude here with that's really the takeaway. We have to remember that the key to getting the United States involved, to using those unique bombs, the massive ordnance, the bombs that the United States, the B-2 bomber, used on Natanz and on Fordo was only possible because of the success, the really astonishing success of the Israeli operation. And it was that awakened the opportunity in the White House and made it change its position from originally distancing itself from the Israeli operation in the end to joining it and dropping these critical weapons.
Edward,
please.
Yes, Edward, let me just come in there. And while we did see the attacks and the targetings that took place from the Israeli and the US side, we cannot ignore the damage that Israel sustained as well. And because those visuals also made it across the world. Whether it was Israel's rising lion, Iran's true promise, or US midnight hammer, these last 12 days have shown how all parties would not hold back. Can there be productive diplomatic talks after such hostilities? What's the path forward if we were to look ahead?
Well, in a way, those you're absolutely right to point that out. And of course, there were significant damage inflicted by Iran's ballistic missiles. And we should note here the contrast for your audience, where we see that indeed in this Israeli operation, we see hospital and apartment buildings hit. But where were they hit? They were hit in Israel. It was Israel that suffered the calamity of having, here in the late stages of the operation, a strike directly on an apartment block that killed at least 4 Israelis. And that brought the death toll up somewhere around 30 Israeli civilians killed in there. And again, on the Iranian side, thankfully, it appears that the Israeli strikes were on target, were in fact precise, and were not hitting civilian targets. Israel kept a disciplined operation and remarkably precise, using both its intelligence and its military skills to penetrate, take care of the air defense systems that Iran has, and to make accurate strikes on its military infrastructure. So that's all to the good. And in terms of diplomacy, again, we have to hope that in this weakened condition, and with Iran somehow trying to save its face and claiming some sort of victory, which again is actually, I take as encouraging news, we have the open door for diplomacy that's been offered by IAEA chief Rafael Grossi. He immediately said, after the ceasefire, invited the Iranian foreign minister to come to Vienna and to talk about how to finally deal with Iran's nuclear program. That was his invitation. We have to hope he accepts that. And I also should note here that we had the UN Secretary General, Mr. Guterres, who also welcomed, congratulated President Trump on achieving the ceasefire. So those are all indicators for Iran that basically the way forward for Tehran is through diplomacy. Please.
That was Edward P. Joseph, foreign policy analyst, joining me from Montenegro. Edward, always a pleasure speaking with you. It's a rapidly evolving situation here. There will be more to discuss. Would love to have you on the broadcast again.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.